Hey everyone, my name is Frankie Belrain. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a video on Hidden Figures, which is one of my favorite movies, and also it's kind of relevant to like day-to-day that's happening right now because a lot of people are going into space. There's oxygen on Mars, like they literally made oxygen on Mars now. So this movie kind of feels really relevant to everything that's happening in 21. So I was like, hey, let me talk about some of the big brain, beautiful women who actually made it possible for astronauts to go into space and for like different governments around the world to actually be doing the things that they're doing in space now. Before we jump right into this video where I talk about Hidden Figures, really quick, just want to mention I have social media. Instagram, it's kind of the only social media that I use regularly. You're very welcome to see what kind of art I make, the different foods that I've been creating, or just like day-to-day snippets of my face. You're very welcome to check out my Instagram. I've also started making this YouTube channel. It's been 1 year since I started making this YouTube channel, and I need to get better at posting every week. That is my goal for this year. Post one video every single week about different movies or food, making art. I'm doing making my Halloween costumes video really soon, which is exciting. Fashion videos. I've started making clothing with a sewing machine. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, you're very welcome to click that bell icon and get subscribed to see when I post my content. Okay, so we're gonna just jump right on in. I have way too many notes because this movie, I will say right off the bat, basically every single moment of this film is relevant to the plot and is chocked full of information and beautiful things to look at. So it was really hard for me to like whittle down my notes and condense them enough to actually be able to make a video that's not an hour long. So we're gonna try not to do that today. And well, look at that. 58 minutes. You moron. I just need to stop trying to make movie review videos like short. It's not gonna happen. They're going to be long and annoying. And yeah, I'm not gonna get to every single point in this film. I'm not trying to tell you the entire story of Hidden Figures, but I am gonna try and touch on the points that I found interesting and that worked really well to tell the story of these amazing women. So let's jump right on in. So at the beginning of Hidden Figures, we're introduced to our main character, Catherine, as a child, and we see Catherine as a child staring out the window of the car, and that moment transitions into, like, you know how in movies in the very beginning they'll show like young versions of our main characters and transition into older versions of our main characters? They use this moment to have Catherine staring out the window in one direction, transition that into Catherine staring out the window of a car in the other direction, but when she's like 30 something, and she's stuck on the side of the road with two of our other main characters, Dorothy and Mary, because their car's having trouble and they're trying to get to work at NASA. In this scene, Dorothy's like working on the car, and all of a sudden this white cop shows up, like pulls up alongside them. And just for context, this is the 1960s. This movie centers around when astronauts in America were working against Russia to try and get into space first. So it's the early 60s, and a white cop pulls up alongside these three African-American women on the side of the road. It's a charged scene. There is tension, obviously. And the white cop actually asks for their IDs, like needs to see their identification, even though they've done nothing wrong and they're stuck on the side of the road, which is up and also should be illegal because they aren't doing anything bad, but racial tensions in America dictate that this dude needs to be an asshole, apparently. He asks their IDs, they show him that they work for NASA, and he like looks up into the sky and he's like, we can't let the Russians win.
do you ladies need an escort to work? Because Dorothy actually gets the car to start. I'm literally gonna read you what I wrote that Mary said in this moment because it was super hilarious. The officer escorts them to work with his sirens on, like going way too fast down this 2-lane highway, and Mary is driving like right on his bumper behind him, and she's like, oh, I'll tell you where it begins. 3, I'm gonna change the quote because this word is not acceptable for a white person to use, so I'm gonna insert African American into that moment. 3 African American women are chasing a white police officer in Hampton, Virginia in 1961. Ladies, that there is a goddamn ordained miracle. I love this. And she's driving so quickly that her other 2 friends, Dorothy in the front and Catherine in the back, are like holding on to the sides of the car being like, you need to slow down. We're going to die. But Mary's like, I don't give a I'm gonna drive fast and I'm going to chase this white cop down the road because he said follow me, so I'm going to. I feel like out of all 3 characters in this film, Mary and I have the most similar personalities. So I just vibe with the fact that she's like, I'm gonna do what he said and I'm gonna drive like a freaking maniac. Yes, girl. Yes, bring that fire. Bring that energy. I love it so much. They drive to work, the police officer drops them off, and then we get a little bit of like background information about the space race between the Americans and the Russians. And the Russians have sent, I believe it was there's a dog successfully launched, Sputnik 4. Sputnik 4 was one of the Russian cosmonaut thingamajiggins, and it had a dog inside, and the dog survived. People are now like, yeah, things can survive going into space and coming back. Now we need to trial run this with people. As this is going on, we also are introduced to the concept of the IBM machine, which was basically one of the first computers. I am not an expert on like the history of technology, so I know that it wasn't the first computer, but it was the first one that NASA was using, like a digital computer, not a person computer. But the IBM machine room is empty and they're trying to figure out like, what are we gonna do? We need to get this machine in here and we need to start it working because they need the calculations churned out faster than people can do it so that they can keep up with the changing math to actually make their rocket physically able to go into space and come back. That's the challenge that they're facing right now. And we transition from talking about like the wider world of what's happening in the space race to Dorothy, who's basically the supervisor of all of these women that work in the computing department. Even though she doesn't have the job title or the money to back that up, they're not giving her the pay that she deserves, which is up. She's handing out job assignments. Mary gets a permanent transfer to a new department where she's basically going to be a female engineer, but she doesn't actually have an engineering degree because racism and sexism are at play. She gets a transfer to a new job site. I just have to say, this was super dangerous. This whole scene doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Mary walks into this wind tunnel where they test whether or not the actual like shields on the outside of the spaceship will fly off due to pressure in the atmosphere. But Mary somehow is walking into her new job, not through like an office where you'd expect people to come through the first time. She walks up the wind tunnel while they're about to turn it on. And her heel gets stuck in the grating of the floor in this wind tunnel, and they give her literally like 10 seconds to get out of this wind tunnel before she's going to get killed by the force of this wind. My question is, why the heck was she walking up the wind tunnel? Why the fuck didn't they turn the wind tunnel off? Why did this happen to begin with? All of that, super dangerous. I don't understand it. But anyway, Mary runs off. She had to leave her shoe in the wind tunnel or risk death. She watches as the heat shield, it doesn't obviously function as they want it to because the wind shoots off some little like metal panel things, which is really funny too. It looks like the props department took these metal shields and were literally just chucking them at this like main engineer's face. They're all standing behind a window, and the only time these 2 panels like fly off the spaceship, they hit almost the exact same point. So it's like the props department was like, you, sir. We're just gonna chuck it at your face. I don't know. I just noticed that while I was watching through and I was like, they both hit the exact same spot in this window. Maybe somebody in the props department didn't like him very much. A very small but significant moment happens between Mary and her boss. I don't know what his name is. He's a Polish dude whose parents died in a Nazi death camp. And they have this conversation where she's like, I want to be an engineer. If I was a white man, I would be an engineer by now because she has the knowledge. She has a big brain. She's just not allowed to take the classes that she needs to get that degree because racism. And her boss is like, anything is possible these days. We're literally living the impossible. So go for it. You need a court date to take night classes at this high school. Go for it. Fight for what you believe in. Fight for what you want. And I really like Mary's new boss, even though we don't really get to see a lot of him. He's a minor character. He's really motivational speaker type dude, and he makes me happy. He seems like a good guy. As I mentioned earlier, Dorothy was handing out different assignments for jobs, and Dorothy gave Catherine a new assignment to work on the space task force. She was apparently the only computer that they hadn't run through yet. So apparently the boss dude works these people until they don't like working for him anymore, and he's like a hard ass or something. I don't know why, but they finally come to the realization that African American women have big brains too, and they can do just as well as other human computers. So they assign Catherine to work for the Space Task Force. The moment that she walks through the door with her cardboard box full of books and plants and office supply type stuff, some little dip piece of white trash mother puts a waste paper basket on top of her box and expects her to take the trash out because he thinks that she's the maid. What a warm welcome! How nice of them to be so considerate of the fact that she's now one of their coworkers and not the janitorial staff. She was transferred to their department. They should know that a person of color is going to be working in their office, but everybody in the office stares at her and makes her feel uncomfortable. If a bunch of coworkers that I had when I walk in the first time stared at me the way that they were staring at her, I would run for my life. I am not as badass as Catherine's character. I don't work in the same environment as Catherine's character, but those scared me. And she's a badass for being like, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if you're staring at me, making me feel uncomfortable. I am going to do my job, and I'm going to do it well. Catherine starts working in this new office, and I'm just gonna call him Sheldon because he's the main guy from The Big Bang Theory. He makes faces at her and is being creepy, and he hands her these blue booklets that are basically the mathematical formulas and all of the information about the propulsion of these astronautical devices. I am not an expert, obviously, but he hands her these notebooks and he's blacked out all of the data and information that Catherine needs to actually do these calculations. And she's basically sitting there how do I do my job not having the tools to do my job? And we're left with that question of what the fuck is she gonna do? It's super awkward and super weird. And then the infamous bathroom running scene happens. So for context, there is only one colored washroom in the entirety of the NASA's campus in Virginia. So Catherine is forced to run all the way across NASA's campus, which takes her a good 20 minutes both ways to get to the West Wing where the bathroom is, for her to even pee every day. Her bathroom breaks take 40 minutes, and she's forced to run around with big armfuls of booklets doing math as she goes just to take a pee. That's f***ing awful, and obviously she doesn't feel like she can complain about this. It grinds my gears. It makes my teeth hurt to see that she has to suffer and run around in heels just because idiots didn't remember, oh yeah, she needs a bathroom too, and segregated bathrooms were still a thing in the 60s. Nobody thought that that was something that she needed because they obviously don't give enough of a f*** about her to actually realize that she needs to pee too. I hate this so much. They do a really good job though in that scene of making it feel tense. They use this song that's I think some of the lyrics in the song are just keep running. So it's it makes you feel bad for her that she has to do this like a couple of times every single day and like do her work as she's running around, which is insanity. Oh yeah, another thing about that. I noticed this, and this is just a thought that I had that I have a question for anybody watching this. So Catherine's running around with these leaflets, these big blue booklets of data and information about the NASA propulsion. Let me ask you this. If those booklets are classified information, why did she not get in massive trouble for running around the NASA campus where anyone can grab one of those booklets from her with classified information and just run away? Why did she not get in trouble for that? Because even her, the woman who is allowed to work in that room with like obviously limited information, she's not allowed to have the data, but why is she allowed to remove those booklets from the office and not get in trouble? That didn't make any sense to me. Like, I understand that she needs to continue to work on her assignment as she's running around, but I feel like somebody should have noticed that she took all of this classified information with her outside of the office and like yelled at her for it. Nobody ever says anything about that. Security breach just does not occur to them for some reason. I don't know. That was just something that I had in mind. Doesn't really make any sense to me. So later that afternoon, after Catherine does her like mad dash to the bathroom scene, we also are forced into this very uncomfortable moment where we see Catherine getting a cup of coffee. I want to explain a couple of things. Catherine's mug is brown. Every other mug in this entire movie is white. I noticed this because I was like, wait a second, cup different colors, and they are the same like shape of mug, so NASA issued cups based on race, and that pisses me off. That's just the one point. Second point, Catherine absentmindedly, because she's just thinking about her work and she's going about her business, she walks over to the coffee pot and she grabs herself a cup of coffee, and everybody in the office stares at her because, again, segregation is a thing in Virginia at this time in 1961. So an African-American woman using a coffee pot that is used by a bunch of white dudes makes them all stare at her and make her feel super uncomfortable. I'm losing the words. It makes me so incredibly uncomfortable that she has to put up with this bullshit. She just wants a cup of coffee. Let her have a cup of coffee. It's awful. So she grabs her cup of coffee, she goes back and she sits down at her desk. This point is gonna come up again in the future, but for right now, just keep that stuck in the back of your noggin. The day drags on. They obviously work really late because this is one of those things where it's like a time crunch. They're fighting against the Russians to get astronauts into space as quick as possible. So all of the human computers have to stay late and work on their calculations really, really late into the night. And it's so cute. Dorothy and Mary wait for Catherine even though the sun's going down. They all carpool together, and Dorothy and Mary wait for Catherine to come out of work. And yes, they give her a hard time, but it was super nice of them to be like, yeah, we're not gonna let you go home alone on the bus. We want to be there for our girl, especially after a big day of like getting a new transfer to a prestigious department. Yeah, so they drive home together, and Dorothy rants about how she's not getting paid properly for her supervisor position. She's not a supervisor, but that she should be the supervisor. She should get paid for her work, and she should get the title of supervisor, but racism gets in the way of that, and for some reason these people are just like, you don't need a supervisor? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, they go home. I have to show this shot. I'm so proud of myself for getting this shot. But in this film, the filmmakers are super good at showing like big wide shots of the actual scenery or the departments or the buildings, you know, just to show a bigger, broader perspective of where our characters are in the world. And there's this really freaking gorgeous night scene when all three of them are driving home, and it's like gorgeous sunset. I am chef's kiss in love with that very, very tiny moment. We go, it's nighttime. Catherine says goodnight to her children. We meet her mother very briefly, and then the next semi-important scene that we have is the weekend, where everyone is going to church. So there's this church service, and the pastor is basically thanking all of the women at NASA for working on these jet propulsion things. And we're introduced to Colonel, what's his face? Colonel Jim Johnson. He is the love interest of Catherine, but he's not the love interest yet. So the service happens, and then everyone goes out onto the lawn of the church because there's a church picnic. While they're having this picnic on the church lawn, Mary and her husband are arguing over whether or not Mary is actually capable of becoming a female engineer, because racism, and also her husband is kind of the opinion that you should fight for like your right to have things. He, I believe, is in the civil rights movement and is basically being like, Mary, you need to fight for these things. Which is funny, they're having an argument about her becoming an engineer, and he's supportive of that, but they're fighting about it. Mary, Dorothy, and Catherine meet up at this one table, and they're like getting food for themselves, and they're talking about Colonel Jim Johnson, and it's super freaking adorable. This is another reason that I love Mary as a character, and I feel like she's like, we vibe personality wise, because they're talking about how cute he is and how he's looking over at Catherine, and then Mary starts gesturing for Jim Johnson to come over and talk to them, and I was just like, best wing women ever. Holy shit. Like, Catherine is like, I don't want to talk to him. Like, he's cute, but he's not interested in me. What are you talking about? And then both Dorothy and Mary are like, no, he's definitely interested, girl. Like, he's coming over this way. I love them so much. And then they're like, we need to go get a piece of pie. Enjoy your conversation. Mary and Dorothy f*** off and let Catherine and Jim have their first conversation, which is really cute. The problem is the Colonel, he f***s up bad. He f***s up really, really bad in their first conversation. So they're talking about what they do for work, and they seem to be getting along, they seem to be vibing, and then all of a sudden the Colonel is basically like, they let women into NASA and do calculations. They do? Really? I'm not quoting exactly what he said, but he was basically like in disbelief that they would let women work at NASA and do mathematical calculations for these really important rockets. So Catherine is like, she literally stands back and she's like, I handle more mathematical calculations in like all of these different very specific areas like analytical geometry and all of these really fancy things that obviously I've never had a chance to do. Nobody really knows how to do these things except mathematicians and genius brains. But she's like, I do all of these things every single day by hand. Don't fuck with me, sir. And you can tell that she's just like, I am not into this. You are sexist about the fact that I am a capable, strong, independent woman, and I am able to do mathematical calculations for this really important thing, and you are in disbelief if that's even being possible. So she shuts his shit down and whoops his ass, being like, I'm not putting up with this bullshit. Walks away. They end their conversation badly, obviously, because he doesn't get a chance to talk to her. She's just like, I don't want anything to do with you. Mad respect on that front. We transition over to see all of the potential astronauts for the actual program arriving at Langley, this big, I believe it's a hangar where they keep all of the like really big fighter planes or something. Again, I have no clue. But all of the human computers and the workers at NASA are there, and they shake the hands of these astronauts. After that little like ceremony at Langley took place, we transitioned over into Catherine being in the office again, and like I mentioned, the coffee pot was gonna come back into play. The hat dip boys gave Catherine a coffee pot of her own because segregation is a thing. And they didn't even plug it in. No one's gonna make the coffee. They expect her to make her own coffee because racism. They don't think that she is allowed to be on the same playing field, even when it comes to f***ing cups of coffee. It shouldn't surprise me that this was a thing and this happened to basically every single African American person and still does to this day, but it pisses me off. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to yell in this video, but it just makes me so freaking mad that she had to put up with this bullshit in her own office. While this is happening with the coffee pot segregation situation. We also are like in the same scene with Catherine, and she figures out that if she holds these booklets with all the calculation details that have been blacked out up to a light source, she can actually read what's happening underneath the text, which I love her so much for. You gotta figure out how to work, and if you don't have the tools that you need, you have to be flexible to figure out how to be able to get the information to do the job. So she does. And the hilarious part of this is she uses the calculations and the data that she gets from that little light source experiment, and she gets calculations that are spot on. Like, nobody's been able to do this math up to this point. Everybody's been basically like shot in the dark trying to figure out how they're gonna get a spaceship up into space and back down without it exploding. And she calculates that with information that was blacked out of notebooks, and she does it flawlessly. Flawlessly. She drew this giant calculation on one of the like wall-sized chalkboards that they have in this office, and she does that, and she just walks out. I'm pretty sure she went to the restroom or something after this, and all of her coworkers are like, who did this? Who did these calculations? What's up? They did it correctly. What the f? Super random. But then we, like a second later, transition to Catherine sitting in Mr. Harris, her boss's office, and they're another infuriating scene. She has to defend herself from doing these perfect calculations because they think she's a fucking Russian spy. It's so stupid. It's so ironic and hilarious and stupid. She's like, no, I just held the fucking books up to the light so I could actually do my job because you aren't giving me the data that I need to do these calculations correctly. So she figured out how to do it herself. She's not a Russian spy. It's super awful and weird and ugh. But the funny thing is that I noticed about this is, and anybody who has like a job that involves security breaches and like classified information, if you know how things work out more like in the real world, let me know if I'm correct about this. But if somebody in my office told me, hey, we think you're a Russian spy, they wouldn't just take my word for it and be like, yeah, no, I'm not a Russian spy, would they? And then let you continue on with your work, right? You would actually have to go through background checks before you were allowed back in the office to determine whether or not you really are a spy, right? That just seems logical to me, but that doesn't happen in this film. Mr. Harris asks her, like, hey, Catherine, are you a spy? And she's like, no, I'm not a spy. And then they just continue on with their work. Like, security breaches mean literally nothing in this film, which is super strange to me. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's continue. You're doing good. What? Sorry. Last sip of coffee. There's always like too much sugar at the bottom. I was not prepared for that. After Catherine is done defending herself against her fucking boss about being a Russian spy, we flash over to the weekend. Best time of the week, where all three of these beautiful women are hanging out and they're playing cards and they're talking about work, and Dorothy walks in and being like, we need to stop talking about work. No more work. It's the weekend. Let's get up on this homemade hooch that I created and enjoy our lives, enjoy the cards. I love these three women too because they're such like fun, supportive friends who just hang out and get wasted in the middle of the day. And all three of them are like dancing around this kitchen and baking. Just genuinely one of the like sweet, fun, enjoyable life moments that makes this feel like I want to hang out with these women. I would love to be invited to one of their day drinking parties and just enjoy life with these human beings. Their relationship is absolutely friendship goals. I kind of already have that friendship with the two friends that I've hung out with during quarantine, except we get toasted instead of drunk in the middle of the day. It's fabulous. Anyway, I hope everybody has a friendship like that somewhere in their life. It's very stress relieving and enjoyable. Okay, next we transition over to Dorothy. I probably still the weekend because she's walking around with her 2 sons in downtown. And we see this, I just have to point out really quickly, the filmmakers are really good at packing small, potent information into very small amounts of time. We see a group of people protesting for civil rights in downtown, and there's police with like vicious dogs, and it's terrifying. And then we also see a segregated water drinking, like outside of an ice cream shop, where this mother drags her child away from a man who's drinking out of a water fountain next to her. Oh my god, they're so good at just injecting a little bit of tension about what was happening with racial tensions in the United States at like that time in the 1960s into such small like time capsule periods in this film. It's so good. Anyway, Dorothy's going to the library with her sons, and she's actually kicked out because she's not in the colored section of the library because segregation. And the librarian is like, we don't want trouble, you need to leave. They don't have the books that you need in your section. Well, that's just how the world works. So they're thrown out by a security guard, and I hate this moment because it shows more of the potency and like the actual life, day-to-day existence of what it's like to be an African-American person in this country, and especially in the 60s when you could be thrown out of a library just for reading a book. That's absurd to me. But Dorothy, like, in her sneaky, not condonable way of getting back at the library, she actually stole the book that she wanted from the library to teach her how to use the IBM machine. It's something to do with the programming of the IBM machine, and she's teaching herself how to program it so that she can make it function and actually like have job security. I can't remember what the program is called, but she steals that book. She gets back at the librarians and she's like, I pay taxes. I paid for this book. Okay, it's mine. I love that mood, but also like don't steal things. Yes! Oh, I love this moment. Okay, there's this birthday party, and I believe it's for one of Catherine's daughters, and Dorothy and Mary actually invited Colonel Sexist Man, Jim Johnson, over to the birthday party so he could apologize for being a sexist piece of garbage to Catherine. And it's super hilarious in this specific scene. They're dancing in the living room to like some slow jams in the evening. Jim Johnson is trying to apologize to Catherine. They have this little like snippet where he says something and she's just mm-hmming him like a couple of times in a row. She's just like, you're so sorry. I love her so much. She's just giving him attitude, and rightly so. He was an to her, like having met her 20 minutes previously, he decides to be a sexist piece of garbage to her. They slow dance together, they actually make up, and he's like, I was wrong, I said some things that were very ignorant about you and your work, and I apologize. And they actually start dating, which is really cute, and she forgives him. You know, they obviously got off on the wrong foot, but he apologized and they moved on. Once they've like made up and everything, we actually get a little snippet of like out in the world information because the Russians successfully launched, what was it? Their first astronaut into space. I don't know what the, I didn't write down what the actual Sputnik astro name, title, whatever the it was. I didn't write it down, but it was the first actual human astronaut to go into space, and they find out about that in the middle of this party. The next day at work, the Space Task Force meets, and Mr. Harris, the boss of all of these human computers, tells them like, hey, we are on crunch time mode now. You're not gonna get paid extra. You're gonna work longer hours than you've ever worked in your life. Call your wives, call your girlfriends. Let them know this is how it's gonna be from now on, because they are now literally racing. They don't even have a rocket that goes into space yet. The American program hasn't even gotten a spaceship to go up into the atmosphere and come down, while the Russians have sent multiple of those, a dog, and now a human into space. So they're feeling the rush to get done. So there's a little montage that we get of like what's happening in all the different aspects of the world in this film. There's a montage of rockets blowing up and failing. There's some training that's happening where the astronauts are in one of those like rotating speed propulsion, I don't know. Calculations are being done. Catherine's still having to like run to the bathroom on the other side of this freaking giant NASA campus to get her work done and pee like a regular person, it's stupid, but she has to keep doing that. IBM's not functioning. The white dudes that are in charge of the IBM machine aren't actually being able to make anything happen. This is when Dorothy breaks into the IBM room and actually makes the machine function. Okay. Go away! That worked. I just had to slam my window and the bird f***ed off. This is the part of the movie where Dorothy breaks into the IBM room, and now that she's learned the programming language based on the book that she took from the library, she's learned the language and she's actually able to put the IBM machine together better than the white dudes who were failing, even though they were in charge of this machine to begin with. And also, just have to say, Dorothy is able to do these calculations and fix the IBM machine while simultaneously training about 30 different women on how to use this programming language. She is one badass motherfucker, and she's not even a supervisor. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Oh my god, she's so bad. She's so good at, like, figuring out how things work, and yet she's not getting paid for her labor and for her big ass brain doing big brain things. It's so dumb. I don't understand. At the same time that all of this is happening, because a lot of the times throughout this movie, all three of these characters are doing different things at the same time. Again, this movie is full of so much information, it's really hard to condense it. Mary got a court date to go and like plead her case so she can take the night classes at a white high school so that she can get her engineering degree and actually be an engineer at NASA. She gets that court date and she goes to her court date. We flash over to what Catherine's doing, and this is one of the most emotional, riveting scenes in the entire movie. Catherine, as I've mentioned before, has to run across the NASA campus to try and pee, and it's raining. It's raining, it's pouring. She comes back after her pee break, soaking wet, and she is confronted by her boss, Mr. Harris, who's basically like, what are you doing? Why are you gone 40 minutes every other hour? We need you here. We're not paying you to take 40-minute breaks. She screams at everyone in the room about how they treat her like garbage. They treat her like a dog who isn't even allowed to drink coffee out of the same pot as any of them, and whose bathroom is on the other side of the NASA campus. Even though she's a human being and she needs to pee just like everyone else, she has to run around in heels every single day carrying these massive books just to take a pee. And she loses her shit. It's so amazing to watch, because I don't know if I've mentioned up to this point, Mary is a very like outspoken, feisty kind of a person. Dorothy seems to be level-headed and kind of cool with bending the rules, also a little bit like loud and outspoken and very boisterous. Catherine is the quiet one out of the three of these main characters, and she rips everyone a new asshole when she has this big like monologue, screamy speech about how they treat her like garbage, and it makes like the hairs on my arms stand up to see this quiet character scream bloody murder at all of these white men and one white woman. It was amazing to see. It's a very emotionally potent moment in this movie, and after she's just like, you treat me like absolute garbage, she walks out. She f***s off, she leaves. She's like, I'm not putting up with this. I don't want to be here anymore. She basically just grabs her purse and like walks off and goes to lunch, because she's like, this is how I feel, this is how it is. None of you see the racist bullshit things that you do to me every day. Your minor aggressions, your major aggressions of not even giving me the data that I need to do the calculations to help this project every day. And she leaves. She walks out. And then at the very end of that, it's just dead silence in the room, and Mr. Harris walks over and he like slowly peels off the like sticker that says colored on the coffee pot, and he just like holds it, and that's it. Very emotionally charged moment in this whole movie, and I like worship at the altar of Catherine every day, just for that, just for being a badass to tell people how she really feels. After she screams at everybody, we move over and Mr. Harris is literally taking, I think it was like a sledgehammer, and he's hacking away at the like colored washroom sign that was in the West Wing at the NASA campus, and he breaks it off of the wall. And okay, I have to say, that was a very nice moment. I don't actually know if that happened at any point in history. I don't know the accuracy of whether or not a white dude would do something like that for an African American woman back in the 60s. It's a great moment. All the feels. But then Mr. Harris says the stupidest line. Like, it makes sense. But it's also such a naive, stupid thing to say to a bunch of African American women. He's like, here at NASA, we all pee the same color. I mean, maybe? I feel like they could have crafted that moment a little bit better and made it less cringy, whatever he said, because it's a very emotional scene. It's very like, he's fighting for their right to have a bathroom. Let's make equality a thing kind of a moment. And then he ruins it with this stupid line about peeing colors. Like, couldn't they have done something a little bit better than that? I don't know. And I also don't know if this is like a historically accurate moment. So maybe someone actually did say something like that, or maybe this is just bullshit that is like a fictional creation of these filmmakers. I have no idea, but it's really dumb either way. There's a really quick moment where the Colonel, Jim Johnson, actually meets Catherine's 3 young girls, and he brings her soup. He brings Catherine soup when she's sick. So they all sit around the dining room table and they're like, it's starting to look more and more like a traditional little family, even though Catherine and Jim are just dating at this point, but super freaking cute. If you have a significant other who brings you soup when you're sick, they are a keeper. Hopefully. It's a good sign either way. After they have their little cute dinner scene, we transition over to NASA and the Freedom 7, which I believe that was one of the first rockets to contain an astronaut to shoot up into space, is launched. And that gives the Space Task Force that Catherine works at job security, because now they've like ejected a person into the atmosphere. They want to do orbits around the planet, and they still haven't figured out how to do that without like burning up their machine. So they need to figure out how to do that. We cut over after the whole Space Task Force has been let like in the know about, hey, you're actually going to be continuing to do this. Jim and Catherine are hanging out at her house and they're doing dishes. There's this cute little like montage of them like falling more in love with each other. And I love this moment so much because Jim actually asks her, like, isn't it about time that I kiss you, Catherine? Asking permission to kiss someone is one of the sexiest things that you can do, just because you respect the person's boundaries. You respect the fact that maybe they don't want to kiss you, or maybe they really do want to kiss you. The men in this movie that are like in relationships with the women in this movie are so supportive and sweet. There's none of this creepy like domineering thing, because a lot of films that are centered around the 60s love to portray relationships as having kind of like not quite balanced relationships. They're not equal standing relationships. But in this movie, they do that. They actually have like Catherine's first kiss in the kitchen, and they talk about it first. And then we also flash over to Mary, who successfully got her court date and fought to be able to take her night classes. And her husband is supportive of the fact that she's gonna go out and spend time away from their young family at night and take classes. And he supports her by giving her mechanical pencils. Dorothy has a really sweet, supportive husband. We only actually see him like one time in this movie, but it feels like all 3 of these women had really loving, supportive relationships. It's just a warm, fuzzy, happy feeling that this involves, and I'm just so happy for all 3 of them. I hope that they really did have supportive husbands in real life, because obviously this movie is based on real life, and I genuinely hope that they had good relationships, because it's just so cute. So the Space Task Force talks about the math involved in making the spaceship not fall into the ocean and get lost, because obviously these spaceships are like million-dollar projects for the government. It's a brief moment. Catherine is the only one that asks questions in that scene, which is very weird. We flash over and Dorothy gets caught in the room with the IBM machine, like fixing and fiddling with things. And she's actually getting numbers to come out of this device. And these white dudes are like, how did you do this? What's going on? And she's just like, I'm a mad genius. That's about it. We move over to Catherine, who's not being allowed into these like secret meetings where they make the decisions about, you know, where we want to land this machine and all of the like really specific information about the spaceship going into space and coming back and all of that. She's not allowed in that room, even though she's the person who's making the calculations to determine the specifics of what's happening with this machine. So she keeps fighting with Sheldon, and Mr. Harris finally is like, yeah, come in. We need you. Come into this room. She's the only woman in this room. And Mr. Harris hands her a piece of chalk and is like, show him how it's done, Catherine. She goes up to the whiteboard and she's like, okay, so you want to land in, I believe it's the Caribbean. That's where they wanted the spaceship to come down. They have this like go point thing to make sure that the spaceship won't burn up on re-entry. They have to be very specific about their mathematical calculations. And Catherine like literally blows everybody's mind by doing all of this analytical geometry without one of those big typewriter calculators they had back in the 60s. She just does it in her head. And she throws up all these numbers on the wall and she's like, you're gonna end up right here on the map. And then there's just silence because she's like, I did my thing. And everybody's like, what the hell? We've been trying to figure this out for months and now she's doing it for us right in front of our faces. Love that moment. Dorothy is basically like, I have trained all of my workers, the human computers who were about to lose their jobs because the IBM machine came in and can apparently do the things that they do better. But Dorothy trained all of her coworkers on how to use the programming data. And she's like, okay, if you want the IBM machine to work, you're gonna hire all of us to use this machine and churn out the numbers that you need. And this giant like horde of women goes over to the IBM room and they start crunching the numbers. Catherine goes home to her little family and Jim Johnson actually proposes to her, gets her daughter's permission to propose to her, and they get married. There's this, it's a very brief moment of Catherine in her wedding dress because we don't actually see the entire wedding. Sadly, in between that moment of getting engaged and having her wedding, she's actually fired from her job because since the IBM machine has started working, they don't need her to do calculations anymore, which is insane to me. She gets engaged, she gets fired, she gets married. Holy sh! After this tiny snippet of Catherine getting married, we're finally at the like last really big finale of this movie, and the people in the command central that are taking care of all of the details of launching this astronaut into space, they realize that the IBM machine is pumping out incorrect data, and they're like, we need Catherine, we need her big brain, where is she? So this is really funny. They send this random white skinny boy to run across NASA's campus back over to the West Wing, where all of the African-American people work for NASA, and it's the same running song that Catherine had when she's like running back and forth across campus to go pee. They do the exact same thing, but with a white guy looking for Catherine, because she's now so important that they need to get her into this command central. This dude runs over, he finds her, she does the calculations, and then both of them run back across NASA's campus using the same running song, which I find really funny. And she goes up to command central and she's like, here's the data. And then they slam the door in her face. She's not allowed in the command central because she's a woman of color. And there's this one moment where like sinking dread just drops into your stomach and you're like, fuck, she just did all of this work. She just walked thousands of miles, like basically with her mind, did all of these incredibly detailed calculations that nobody else seems capable of doing in this place. and they slam the door in her face at the very last moment. That tense moment happens. She's walking down the hall away from the command central, and then Mr. Harris runs out and he's like, hey, I have a security badge for you, like, come back, we need you. And she's allowed into command central. So thankfully they don't actually like slam the door in her face permanently forever. They do let her in, but it's like, just so much like you kind of a vibe going on right there that I was like, I need to take a breather, because it's like, me, I'm so mad for her in that moment. And then they switch it up on you emotionally and you're like, yes, she's allowed in command central because she is the reason that, what's his face, the astro hunk Glenn, the astronaut, whatever his face is, he's actually gonna go into space because of her brain. They better let her into command central. I'm glad that they did in the end, but like, holy, oh my god, there's so many pictures. Sorry, I'm looking through my photos and it's like, ah. So Catherine's in command central and she's watching as they like send the astronaut into space. For a very brief moment, we flash over to Dorothy, who does actually get her supervisor position. Her boss, the white lady with a bob, she gives Dorothy the security card and she's like, you are a supervisor. Very small moment too. Dorothy and this white lady have had like an ongoing relationship throughout the movie, and for the first time in the entire movie, this white lady calls Dorothy by her last name. Instead of saying Dorothy, she says her last name in like a respectful gesture, being like, we are both supervisors, I will say your last name because that's a respectful thing to do. Finally. So we go back over to the room with all the coordinates and the launching, and we see the spaceship flying through space and these beautiful shots of the Earth from outside in the atmosphere. There are more shots of like what's happening out in the world, and basically the entire world is laser focused on like the televisions watching this launch happen. People are stopping in the street and like turning on their broadcast radios and staring into the sky, being like, I need to participate in this and watch what's happening. So they go over and they're like watching Glenn do whatever his face is, and he's circling the planet, and then there's this warning light that pops on about something to do with the heat shield being unstable. So instead of being able to do 7 full rotations of the planet Earth, Glenn was only able to complete 3 of those rotations, but with the help of Catherine and figuring out calculations at the last moment, but he can't communicate and he's trying to like manually turn the heat shield and start the transition down into the Caribbean Ocean, or the Gulf of Mexico. Glenn does safely manage to manually get himself back down onto the planet. He's fine, spaceship is fine, and so they successfully got a human being to orbit around the planet, which was a first for the American government. Very big moment, everybody's celebrating in the command central, and Mr. Harris actually like shakes Catherine's hand and asks her, do you think we'll be able to get to the moon? And Catherine is basically like, yeah, bring it on. Let's do this. So this is the very end of the film, and we see Mary actually graduate from her night school classes at this white high school, and she gets to be an engineer. She gets the title, she gets the job. We also flash over to Dorothy, who's successfully running the IBM machine with all of these women who she taught how to program. And at the very end of this movie, Sheldon, the Big Bang dude, brings Catherine a cup of coffee, and they sit there and they're just working on calculations late at night together. It's a nice wrap up of this film to see that all 3 of these characters were able to achieve the goals that they set for themselves, that they like needed to accomplish, because they have big brains. They deserve to have the job titles that also go along with said big brain energy, and they managed to do that flawlessly. So I just want to mention really quick before I like go walk around in the outside world, because I've been sitting here for several hours filming this. This story is based on 3 famous women who did actually work for NASA. This is a story that's based on real life, and these 3 women's names are Dorothy Vaughan, Katherine G. Johnson, and Mary Jackson. So obviously in the end, They all lived to very old age. They are genuinely going to go down in history as some of my personal role models, and also the role models that I think just anyone who wants to accomplish big dreams and make waves in the world should look up to. Because these women, it's literally because of these three women that a lot of the things at NASA that are now being accomplished by astronauts, technicians, mathematicians, all of the above, are able to actually accomplish. And I just need to shout that out. These three amazing people actually made it possible for us to touch the stars. And I don't think we can ever thank them enough for that. There's no way in hell that any of us can ever thank these three beautiful people for the contributions that they've made to our society, to our possibilities of travel, to our scientific advancements, and I will say, because I'm a pessimist, to even existing in the future, because there is an extremely high possibility that we're gonna f the planet Earth up so much so that all humanity is gonna need to jet propulsion into space so that we can survive. If it does, we owe our existence to these women, to being able to go into space and survive. There's nothing we can say that will thank these beautiful people enough. There's literally nothing I can say. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to make this YouTube video, is to shine some spotlight on these fabulous, beautiful people with big brains who were able to make waves in our society and actually accomplish some of the most amazing things and push us forward into the future. It just astounds me. These wonderful people are definitely some of my personal role models. And that's about it. That's the end of this film. That's the end of Hidden Figures. That makes me, I'm finally done. I've literally been filming for over an hour and a half. I'm done. So I hope you all have enjoyed my take on Hidden Figures. If there was anything that I missed throughout this film that you want to talk about down in the comment section, I would love to hear what you have to say about this film, whether you loved it, whether you hated it. Either way, I love to hear people's thoughts about films. I know there's more that I could have talked about, how in the scenes they're super good at showing framing and big wide shots of the actual scenes that are happening, different areas of Virginia in which this is being shot. The movement, the music, oh my god, the freaking costume design. That's something I want to bring up really fast. So throughout this film, you actually can see Catherine's clothes change from being very like flamboyant and colorful in the new workplace that she has. And then throughout the film, her clothing actually starts to become more muted, and the colors of her clothing match the room that she's working in. She's part of the team now. She's not just like some standout garish figure, which I loved super intensely. The 60s garb, the different dresses and the hairstyles that they have, so freaking beautiful. The score, so the different like the running soundtrack that they put behind Catherine having to like run back and forth to the bathroom, very interesting. There's so many parts of this film that are deeply moving to watch. I highly recommend that everybody go check this film out, watch it on your own time, come up with your own conclusions, tell me what you think about it. I hope you've enjoyed this little commentary on Hidden Figures. I hope you all are having a good day wherever you are in the world. Please take care of yourself. I am about to get my second vaccine shot tomorrow. Yeah! Finally, it's almost the end of May. I hope you're getting your vaccine shots and you all are still wearing masks, because even though most governments, well, America at the very least, is being like, hey, you don't have to wear masks outside, wear them anyway. You don't want to die stupidly by having some moron that you've never met before cough on you, and that's how the world ends for you. I'm not letting that happen to myself. I still wear masks. It's warm and humid here in Chicago, and I'm still gonna wear masks. So please continue to wear masks, take care of yourself, take care of your family and friends. I will see you down in the comment section and in my next YouTube video. Bye, everybody.